Hello, everybody. It's me, Fee, or Fiona Timms, otherwise known as White Zulu, author of my autobiography of the same name. And I welcome you all to another chapter from my book. I do hope you're all enjoying my life story. And I must thank all of you for being such dedicated subscribers, especially those who write such complimentary messages below my videos. They are much appreciated. I would like to point out that the previous South African flag hanging on the wall behind me is not a political statement. It is simply a piece of history in the background of my first 50 years of life, being born and growing up in my beloved mother country, South Africa. My autobiography, White Zulu, is not a political commentary and frankly describes my experiences of growing up with the Zulu tribe as my family. That flag is simply a piece of cloth signifying the history of South Africa. It was originally used by the Union of South Africa from 1928 to 1961, when I was 11 years old, and later the Republic of South Africa until 1994. And we're still in Ireland, 1968. I'm 18 years old. I'm staying with cousins in Baltimore, in the southernmost tip of Ireland, County Cork. And Miles, my cousin, same age, had been teasing me about the basking sharks circling our boat. And we're moving on from there. Friends of the Barnbys were due to sail into Baltimore Harbor during the second week of our holiday there. They owned a big luxury 6-berth sailing boat and had invited us to join them on it for a short trip around the coast to an attractive village called Castletownsend, which had a quayside and harbour. The most unique feature of Castletownsend, according to Henry, my uncle, is the big wattle tree growing there due to the mild weather caused by the warm Gulf Stream current that flows past the southern tip of Ireland and which had made our swimming in the Atlantic so pleasant. Nothing special to a South African for whom it's an alien invader from Australia, originally planted like gum trees for useful purposes, because wattles grow very fast and make perfect firewood. But being a bit of an homesick expat, Henry loved anything to do with South Africa and had been longing to see this wattle tree ever since he'd heard about it. By now, Julian, I don't know if I've introduced you to Julian, they'd invited him over as an extra guest, and he was about 5 or 6 years older than I was. And by now, Julian had sort of commandeered me, rather like Pierre had done, as a temporary girlfriend. And we held hands on walks and kissed discreetly in secluded places. He bought me drinks in Murphy's bar, and it was very pleasant to have a young man so attracted to me. The sailing party consisted of Henry. Audrey suffered terribly from seasickness, so had cried off. Miles, Francis, Julian, and myself. We walked down to the quayside at the appointed hour in Baltimore, and there lay the sailing boat waiting for us. The couple were old friend of the Barnbys and about the same age as Henry. They were the only occupants of this beautiful craft, but had a solitary crew member. He was a young Swedish man and an absolute god to look at, wearing only a pair of ragged, faded, cut-off denims. He had shining blonde hair, deep blue eyes, and his tanned body was lean and muscular from pulling at all those ropes and hoisting sails. I eyed him from behind my sunglasses, and he eyed me back with equal interest. We cast off with a stiff breeze, and the white hull skimmed gracefully out of the harbour and out to sea where the waves were fairly big. The Swede had hoisted all the sails and had the very colourful candy-striped spinnaker out as well, making the most of the wind behind us. I loved it. I'd never been out on such a big yacht before, or such a beautiful one, and quickly stripped down to my tiny black French bikini, to lie on a sunbed on the spacious wooden deck and soak up the heat of the Irish summer rays. The most sailing I'd ever done was in a dabchick, basically a surfboard with a sail, on Durban Harbour with a friend of ours, and we tipped over and got thoroughly soaked. This was quite different, and once we were well on our way and quite far out to sea, the owners showed us around the interior of the boat. It was a perfect combination of luxury and comfort, with its 6 double berths and staterooms, as well as a substantial galley and 2 heads. That's the name they use for loos. As soon as we'd reached open waters, Julian had turned green and begun hugging the rail right at the back, where the small Union Jack flapped from a little pole. After a short while, he was being violently sick and hung there for the rest of the morning, throwing up over the side. The rest of us had a hearty lunch, a magnificent spread of, among other lovely things, cold roast chicken with mayonnaise, crusty buttered ham rolls with hot English mustard, and egg and cress sandwiches, which were new to me, and I found absolutely delicious, all of which Audrey had painstakingly prepared and packed up for us the night before. I was still picking up admiring looks from the Swede, whose magnificent muscles rippled under his bronze skin as he worked the sails and sheets, and Henry, always quick to pick up on any signs of a budding attraction or romance, had begun to whisper, "What do you think of Sweetie Pie?" with a lascivious wink and a nudge. As I've said, Henry was the total opposite of Dad, and would encourage even Francis, who was only 15 on that holiday, to flirt with the Murphy twins, who were older than I was. I had to admit that I found Sweetie Pie absolutely gorgeous. And by now, poor old Julian was lying in the scuppers, ashen-faced and rolling over now and again to be sick into a bucket, which the Swede had tossed over to him with rather more contempt than was necessary, I noticed. After several wonderful hours with the bowsprit buffering briskly through the big green swell, sending spray in the form of diamond droplets high into the bright blue sky, we arrived off the harbour of Castletownsend, where the couple were going to moor the boat for the night, to continue sailing on around the coast the following day. After mooring, we explored the little town and saw the famous wattle tree. Then it was dusk, and everybody settled into a cosy little pub on the quayside to enjoy some of the locally brewed ale. "Come for a walk," the Swedish guy whispered to me, and off I went with him to stroll along the wharf, lights now winking on here and there in the village, on the hillside above us in the darkening evening. It was a beautiful time of the day, as I wasn't used to dusk. In Africa, the darkness of night falls within an hour or so. But here the twilight seemed to linger forever. It felt incredibly romantic, with the boats, including the beautiful yacht we'd just left, rocking gently at their moorings. Some had leading lights on, which twinkled in glittering reflection on the ripples of the waters, and the now deserted wharfside was surrounded by little Irish fishing cottages, often, surprisingly, painted in bright pinks and greens. It was like a fairy tale come true, with this gorgeously handsome man beside me, something I'd imagined and longed for in Vevey, when I'd watched the lights sparkling on Lake Geneva, and longed to have somebody to share that beauty with. He took my hand, entwining his fingers among mine as lovers do, and we walked a little further before he suddenly pulled me behind a hut, similar to the one we now called Maggot Lodge in Baltimore. There was a pile of folded sails against the back of the wooden hut, and the Swede pushed me backwards down onto this pile and began kissing me. I was so flattered that this extraordinarily good-looking young man had found me so attractive that I kissed him back. The next thing, he was fumbling at my shorts, trying to pull them off. Then I realized what was going to happen, and I panicked. "I've never done it before," I whimpered, terrified. He stopped what he was doing, drew back, and stared at me incredulously, wordlessly. He must have seen the raw fear in my eyes. Then he abruptly got to his feet, muttered something angrily in Swedish, and stalked off in disgust back to the yacht. I quickly pulled my shorts back up and raced to the pub where the Barnby family was seated, drinking merrily with their friends. I slipped back into my place at the bar and avoided Henry's inquisitive eyes until it was time to leave. All the way back to Baltimore, in the back seat of the taxi Henry had organized for us, I smiled gamely whenever he turned around from his seat in the front and brought up Sweetie Pie's name to tease me, asking me what we'd got up to on our walk. But I changed the subject and turned my attention back to Julian, who, sitting next to me now, although rather damp and not smelling so good, seemed like the perfect gentleman to me. Once back on dry land, he very quickly recovered from his sailing ordeal, and, after a few drinks, the colour had returned to his drained face, and he was back to his normal, cheerful, amusing self. That is all for the time being, and there's more to come next week. I would like to thank John Moslane for putting aside his Friday afternoons to help me produce these videos. Without him, I could not do this. I would also like to thank Sean van Vuren for his sterling work in uploading my videos to my YouTube channel, adding the photos, as well as managing my channel so professionally. If you would like to know more about my other works, I have written 5 books in all, and each one is autobiographical. Please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com, where you will find a lot more information as well as plenty of photographs. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my life story, and there is plenty more to come. A thumbnail photo will be attached each week, and thank you so much for all your support and all the very kind remarks you make in complimenting me on my work. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.